That's fine.
Mark
Transportation planning. Okay.
Yep.
Tone Odom.
Good morning, this is Patricia. I'm here.
Thanks, Patricia. Pasquayaki.
Jason Bahi here, Pasquayaki Tribe.
City of Tucson.
Robin Rain here, City of Tucson.
Pima County.
Ana Olivares from Pima County.
Do we have anyone from Sahuarita? Or South Tucson? Okay, Tucson Airport Authority. I thought I saw Mike Schmeckel here.
So
Suntran.
Steve Spade from Suntran, I'm here.
Okay. University of Arizona.
I'm Mark Novak, University of Arizona.
Pima County DEQ.
Good morning. This is Ursula Nelson.
Anyone from San Javier District, Tone Odom? Okay, do we want to go through staff?
perhaps you could read that off for us, Sonia, would that be okay?
Sure.
All right.
Okay, we have Paul, of course, Casartano, David Atler, David Mitchell, David Zinda, Janine Sullivan, Jamie Brown, Jim DeGrood, Nathan Barrett, and I believe that's it, unless I missed anyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Sonia. Okay, next item is in-kind reporting. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you're paid with federal dollars, please let us know now. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. That is all, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. Next item is the approval of the October 20th minutes. If you had a chance to review those minutes, can I get a motion for approval?
I motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I second. This is Anna.
Okay. Motion has been, it's been motioned and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, minutes are approved. Next item is an overview of the Local Transportation Assistance Program, LTAP, from Nathan Barrett. Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Every year, PAG programs $50,000 of our STBG dollars to be members of the Arizona Local Technical Assistance Program, LTAP. And through that subscription, our member jurisdictions, each of our jurisdictions has access to the programs offered by LTAP. So in order to ensure, encourage full use of this benefit, we invited a couple individuals from ADOT to give us an overview on the LTAP program. Maybe some of this is going to be overview for you guys. Maybe you already know all this stuff, but we thought it would be a good refresher to be aware of what is available through the LTAP program and through this $50,000 set aside out of our federal funds that we with which we pay for this subscription every year. So our first speaker is Rebecca Mayer, who is the Operations and Arizona LTAP Program Manager for ADOT. As the program manager, Rebecca manages the AZ LTAP program and operations of the Technical Learning and Development Program. And that program oversees the training for the Infrastructure Delivery and Operations Division, as well as the Transportation Systems Management and Operations, TSMO. Our second speaker is Jendai Edmead. She is the course administrator and the marketing specialist for the ADOT LTAP program and the Arizona Local Technical Assistant. Okay, she primarily aids employees with training related requests, in addition to handling the scheduling and course completion process for AZ LTAP. Finally, she is also responsible for the general communication and marketing for both programs. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to the two of them, and we'll learn together about what LTAP offers us.
First, I want to say thank you for inviting us to attend. We love to be able to attend any of the events you would like us to come to. What we're here to do as Arizona LTAP is we're here to assist you guys in getting training that you need and any technical assistance that you need. Whether it be technical or management, we can get someone to help you guys out. Jendai, if you could go to services.
Crystal, it's not clicking for me. Ah, there we go.
Because that's where I really want to highlight today on what we offer for you guys. As you can see, we do in-class training. If we go to the next slide. If we look at services, we do on-demand training. What does that mean? That means that you can request training as Sorita did this year, Pima County, City of Tucson. You can request us to bring training to you. We can do it in classroom. We are also doing virtual training now. Today we're doing City of Tucson. We have virtual TCT training for them. So whatever what you need, we can provide for you. We also, I want to talk about the National Highway Institute training. We can host that training for you, and it would be free of charge for anybody within PAG. You can host a training in your area, and we would just get you the materials and just basically pay for the training for you guys. Anything with the FHWA Resource Center, if there's some training there for safety that you might need, we can also be the conduit to get that training for you as well. We have our equipment loan program, which is our retroflectometers and our Stripe Master that are available. You either can arrange to pick it up at our office, or we can actually send it to you and we pay for the shipping to and from. We need to contact us. Our heavy equipment training program is probably one of our most popular programs. It's a 30-hour training that we go to you, and our heavy equipment trainer, he works with what you need in your area, the participants are doing on a daily basis. Also, if you have any of your rodeos available, we're able to come down there and be part of those as well. We can do training. We can do, if you need judges or anything like that, we're available. And our Road Scholar program is really for those boots on the ground, is to help get new employees trained. There's 3 levels now, and the 3rd level is for management. And then you have the 2nd level, which is for your intermediate employee. And that Road Scholar 1 is for your brand new employee. And we have awards that go through those. We have a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. And then if we look at what a contributing member agency is, which PAG is, we supply training to you guys for free. So please feel free to utilize it. If you have any questions, email us. And one of the best ways to find out about what's going on, well, actually, let's talk about the Road Scholar program. If Jendai could go to that next slide. This is the program that we have right now. Level 3 will be coming. We're going to be doing an announcement about that the first of the year. But Jendai, would you like to tell people how they can find out about what's going on in the program?
Yes. So each week we send out a weekly newsletter. I send out a weekly newsletter that includes information from organizations like FHWA, NHI, Asphalt Pavement Institute, and a variety of others, including other LTAP programs throughout the country in all 50 states. You can subscribe to that on our website, or you can email us to have your email added to that list, and you'll get that information weekly. We also send out a quarterly newsletter, which is the one in the middle, the Arizona Milepost. It kind of just gives a recap of our quarter. Again, it includes any relevant information about upcoming events like the, I think the AASHTO expos coming up soon, stuff like that. How to register will include all the registration links and information like that, contact information, to just make sure that it's in one place and easy for our member agencies to access. And also just give you, it's a way for us to also highlight our Rhodes Scholars. Anyone who finished the program gets a little highlight in there, which is kind of nice for you to share throughout your offices. And then finally, on our website, we have an extensive list of links and resources that you can utilize just in terms of getting funding and FHWA, again, seminars and training opportunities. But again, you can opt into this either on our website or by sending us an email. And I think that's it. Yeah.
And we would love, if you guys have anything you would love to contribute to our Arizona Milepost, just send us an email, because if you have any innovative ideas that would be great for other agencies, we would love to highlight that in the Milepost too as well.
Yeah, sorry. I'll also mention there's the FHWA Build a Better Mousetrap competition that goes on every year. And we love to highlight those innovations, even if they're not within our state or from our local counties, but we especially love to highlight our local public agencies when they're recognized in there. So we usually will add that to both our Tapping In weekly announcement and our Arizona Milepost. And like Rebecca said, anything exciting or innovative going on in your agencies, we love to share that with not only the other agencies in Arizona, but also we have, our network includes all the other LTAPs in the 50 states and territories, so, and FHWA contacts. So it's a really great way to get some notice out there.
Thank you, Rebecca and Jendai. Are there any questions of Rebecca or Jendai?
Mr. Chair, this is Anna.
Yes.
Hi, Rebecca Kim. Sorry, can you guys go back to the Rhodes Scholar slide? I wanted to see that a little bit more.
So the classes there being basic materials, basic works on Flagger, signing and striping. We have basic materials, anything like that you're looking for. Or is there some other training you might be missing? Let's say MUTCD training. We can also look at developing something informational or something for you, which wouldn't be part of the Rhodes Scholar program. That would be part of our technical assistance.
Okay, that's good. So we were working towards some kind of, let's say, either a certification or some kind of incentive program for our operators. We could probably reach out to you and maybe tailor one for our equipment ones and our equipment two operators.
That's a great, actually, yes, Anna. We actually do have, like Pinal County uses our Rhodes Scholar Matrix to help with promotions and things like that. Also, Queen Creek uses it as a gauge for MAP goals or for planner goals, or however your agency does it. So we do have several agencies who do use it as to help for promotion or incentives. Well, we can definitely help you out.
That's great. Thank you.
Welcome. And I will also say that the Tribal Technical Assistance Program should be starting back up in December, because I believe they are, or just January, they're awarding the program in December. But if any of the tribal agencies are looking for some of those services that the old TTAP offered, please let us know too, and we can try to get you in touch with someone to help get that training, because I know there was some planning and stuff like that, which is missing right now.
Are there any other questions?
This is Jason from Pasquayaki. Regarding that tribal assistance program, could you forward some contact information out regarding that, please, as well?
Yeah, let me, Jason, I will follow up and see what I can find. I just heard about it, so I will see if they have any information or get you someone you can contact.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good morning. This is Patricia. I would also like to request some of that information to us for the Thorn Autumn Nation.
Okay, can do. I'll see what I can find out, and I will send you guys emails.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Rebecca and Jendai, for your time. It's very interesting.
Thank you.
Very good program.
Thank you for having us again. Please, we would love to attend again.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is preparing for connected autonomous vehicle deployment on Arizona's roadways. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So we've invited ADOT here today to share a little bit of information with us regarding some of their Tismo division activities. With us today is John Roberts. He's currently a Systems Technology Engineering Manager for ADOT. He's been with ADOT for over 14 years in various IT and Tismo positions. Prior to working for ADOT, John held various engineering and management positions in the defense and semiconductor industries. John has a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering and a Master of Science degree in Information Management. And I can just say from our PAG perspective, we've had great interaction with John, who's been very helpful in coordinating with us as we're looking at various data sources and other things that will help us advance the region and support this migration to new transportation technology solutions. So with that, I'll hand it over to John, and then we'll take questions at the end.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you, Vice Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to present today. As Paul stated, what I am presenting today represents the position of the Tismo division within ADOT. It does not necessarily represent ADOT's perspective, although it's very similar. Another thing that I want to make clear too is that our focus, as you will see in the presentation, is primarily on the highway system, as we don't have that many intersections within the state of Arizona, although we do have some, but this is more of a highway view of things and not an urban perspective per se. The other thing too I want to say is, as I'm sure most of you know, this is an incredibly dynamic time in transportation, especially around connected and automated vehicles. So things change a lot. This just represents what I have to say about it today. Tomorrow could be a completely different story. So I guess I probably sound like a lawyer at this point rather than an engineer, but I just wanted to make sure everyone was clear what the presentation perspective was. So let's see. Oops. So in case you don't know about ADOT, this is a brief update and overview. We have approximately 30,000 maintenance lane miles around the state, about 3,700 employees. The Tismo group has approximately 300 employees, and our primary focus is on ITS equipment, operating the system, and then also working with striping and signage around the state of Arizona. A brief overview of the Tismo landscape in case you're not familiar with it. There's several focus areas, safety and mobility, of course, being the highest priority. Operations, a lot of this has to do with situational awareness and response, and then communicating to the traveling public. And the other thing that we focus on is cost. And ideally, our view of things is we're trying to minimize investment in hardware and software as much as possible, and optimize our processes over technology where we can. And then the technology view of things are fairly ubiquitous in that we run the gamut of hardware, software, and data, and all the way through things like big data, AI, cybersecurity, and even some EV support, electronic vehicle support. So from our perspective, the important thing is to try to separate all of the hype from what's going on in the industry. And there's a lot of it. It's really hard, I believe, for all of us to really understand what's really coming down the pipe, how much of this is marketing and hype, people trying to raise funding for their startups or go, do an IPO and do a stock offering and so forth. So it's important for us to take a look at what do the marketing research leaders think And so this is the Gartner hype cycle. If you're not familiar with it, it essentially looks at several areas of a particular market. In this case, it's connected vehicles and smart mobility. And it looks at it from the perspective of when the technology was introduced, peak of high expectations, ultimately leading to the trough of disillusionment, slope of enlightenment, and then ideally some of the things come out of the trough of disillusionment and so forth. People understand how to use technology, and it generally doesn't meet the initial hype of what was communicated within a particular market. So if you look at this down in the trough of disillusionment, you can see essentially all of the automated vehicle technology is down there because people are finding that this is a very challenging technology. Trying to create a vehicle that is going to be all-knowing, can handle practically any situation that's thrown at it, has a large challenge. So you look at some of the technologies here, and you're probably looking at a minimum of 10 years before some of these are available in any kind of production solution. This doesn't mean things aren't being tested and engineered today, because we have plenty of vehicles on the roadway trying to do level 4 and level 5 testing. But when you look at the far right, and this is what's most interesting to us, is the connected car platforms. And that's what I'm going to talk about next. So one of the things that we're looking at is the ADAS market. And so ADAS is essentially a automated driver assist systems. So these are things like automatic emergency braking, lane departure, blind spot warning, collision avoidance, and those kinds of things. So if you look at this market and you look at the graphic on the left, this is divided up between level 2 to level 5 on the SAE automated mobility scale for vehicles. Almost everything out to past 2030 is essentially driver assist. You start seeing things hitting the market that are a little bit more from an automated driving perspective, and that's a true level 5 driving perspective I'm talking about. Level 4, you can still be hands-off and the vehicle is managing the situation, but you tend to be in a geofenced area. So you may have seen some things under test and so forth that look like automated driving. And to a large degree, a lot of those are geofenced. So when you look at that, and then you look at a smaller graph over to the right, you see that the level 4 and level 5 market starts to expand out in late 2020s, early 2030. But you also see some things that we're expecting will happen, is that there'll be some very specific use cases around where this technology will be applied. So things like robotaxi, delivery, freight movement, and so forth. This is where we see things developing. And so one other thing too that we like to consider as well is, in addition to just the hard marketing data that's represented today and technology, it's how is the technology being perceived by the public. And there's a very good study that was done by ASU, and this is one of the slides that I borrowed from that, and it gives you a perspective of the concern of equipment failure in vehicles. And so essentially what this is saying is, as time progresses and the more people learn about this technology, the higher the level of concern there is about it failing. And there's plenty of situations where it can fail. I'm not trying to be an alarmist. This is just something that we're going to have to work through as DOTs and technology providers and so forth. So it's something to keep in mind, and I present it because it could push out the adoption of this kind of technology to something beyond the 2030-ish timeframe, which is what you hear a lot of today, is when a lot of this technology will mature and we'll start seeing a lot more automated driving solutions on the roadway. So our focus right now is ADAS support. So if you look at what is considered the circle of safety around a vehicle, you can, and for those of you that either have driven a vehicle like this, maybe you own it, there's a lot of technology that comes in a new vehicle today. Some of these things, again, around adaptive cruise control or crash avoidance or lane departure and so forth. Those are things that we may or may not be able to affect in the DOT. So our view of things is what we can affect is circled in the red ellipse on the left side, and it's traffic sign recognition and lane departure warning, which is has to do with our striping quality. So when you look at the technology that generally is on vehicles today, and this again is just a representation of what's today. It doesn't mean that vehicles don't have radar, they don't have LiDAR, but a majority of the vehicles have cameras. And so when we look at camera technology today, you can see there's some limitations from field of view and range, which some things for us at ADOT, we have to take into consideration. It's not to say you don't have to take it into consideration as jurisdiction or city and so forth. It's just our focus is primarily on high-speed highway transportation. So where that leads us is trying to keep some things in mind around what a vehicle can perceive in its environment, its recognition, how quickly it can obtain that recognition, and how quickly it might be able to react. And so this is a view of things at 50 miles per hour, where you start looking at camera technology that is in the left column versus some of the items that you might see on the roadway. So delineators, when we look at this and at high speeds, this might not be an effective work zone control solution for us. So it's one of those things that we have to keep in mind in how to plan our safe work zones for vehicles that are already on the roadway. Because again, the thing that we want to do is we want to provide an environment where people who have this kind of technology in a vehicle can use it and take advantage of it, because we believe that it will support a safer driving environment. So some of these things are going to probably be driven in MUTCD development in the CAV section of the MUTCD. So you may see some things in striping technology and also signage that potentially may reflect some of these things that I'm presenting right now. So when we look at our operations and what we're prioritizing is we look at things like level of service for striping and marking, road signs. Vegetation encroachment is an impact on being able to see a lane marking or signage. We need to understand weather level of service. Do we need to change the way we plow snow, for example, on I-40? Other things that we're looking at is trying to take advantage or adopt some of the emerging technologies and being able to send traveler information messages to connected vehicles and do it in a way that is essentially more real time rather than waiting to communicate that through a DMS, for example. Certainly traffic signal technology around SPAT and transportation signal priority messaging is something that we're looking at. We're a little unclear about map messages and who needs to provide that, but this is something that we're working on, looking at any vehicle data that we can get access to and potentially use that in a proactive means to, again, keep the public informed or manage our systems in a safe manner. And again, we have to be really clear on return on investment. We're trying to be as good as stewards as we can with the taxpayer dollars. So we don't want to hop on the bandwagon for some latest technology and find out that it ends up like DSRC technology did, for example. So that's our priorities. When we look at what we're doing to work on these priorities, we do a lot of pilots and proof of concept. So our focus right now is primarily on applying artificial intelligence for situational awareness, using big data and being in a position to scale this as the market changes and we have more data that we're receiving from the roadway. And then looking at alternative communication solutions to try to minimize our investment in things like physical RSUs and other equipment and communication systems that are on the roadway. We're doing things with our LOS program to improve the needs, improve our program to meet the needs of ADAS. Work zone grant will be up, and we also will be upgrading our AZ511 system to support the WZDX, or the Work Zone Data Exchange standard, to its latest standard, which I believe is 3.1 right now, and trying to leverage crowdsourced data and so forth. And again, our view is to try to make things as safe and support mobility as much as we can, and of course support national standards, so we're not in a situation where we're a one-off, for example, between Arizona and California. So that is where we're taking actions right now. This was a presentation that I did for the Institute of Automated Mobility back in September. So this is one of the things I left in there, is where we need help, and it's around situational awareness, improving time to response, looking at improved analytics, communication, trying to reuse our hardware, our alternate solutions to manage the system, looking at lifecycle management, data acquisition. And one thing that I want to emphasize here too is education, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, not only in the public, but within our agencies and so forth, that I believe we need to do a better job, or at least improve some of our focus on getting the message out on what we're doing, either in the state or in other municipalities and jurisdictions, and having a transparent conversation with people that are in the public who may either be scared or concerned about Big Brother, security, and so forth. So at any rate, that's what I have today, and hopefully this was informative, and I can try to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions for John?
This is Robin. I do have a quick question, Mr. Chairman. I would like a copy of the presentation if possible. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
That's something that can be done, John?
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Okay. I had a question about, we're trying to teach these vehicles to recognize striping and road signs and things like that, and traffic control devices. Is there any thought of trying to get those devices themselves to ping or speak to the cars, themselves, instead of relying on cameras?
There has been some discussions around that I've been involved in. As I see the market right now, in general, it looks like the OEMs are trying to go off on their own and just develop the technology and do whatever they need to market and sell their vehicles. Anything around infrastructure that we might do to communicate with the vehicle is going to require some interaction with the OEMs to make sure that we're consistent with any kind of communication methods or channels that they may have or need. Now, the other thing that we'd have to look at is the cost, because if we're looking at trying to have a static sign have some means of communication just for the state of Arizona, that's probably $250,000 signs that we would have to work on, whereas a machine learning or AI kind of vision solution might be a little more cost effective, but we're keeping our options open. We're trying to be open to any possibilities, because again, this is a market that's very dynamic. And for those of you that are old enough to remember Betamax and VHS. I mean, Betamax was a better technology, but VHS won. So there may be better technologies that don't win, and it has to do with other market forces that we have no control of. But again, we're trying to stay flexible and look at all options. But it's a good question, Keith. Thank you.
I was thinking more in terms of cost benefit, in terms of some things that are just truly very hazardous: rail crossings, red light running, wrong way drivers on interstates, things like that. Something that
Right.
could
And those are good points. And there are some traffic signal technologies that are being worked on, and as well as wrong way driver technology. Some of the, if you look at a basic safety message where you can get heading information, there's a lot of interesting data there that we as people who try to manage the traffic on the roadway can learn, because we can see when a vehicle goes the wrong way, gets onto the main line, and maybe where they exit. We have a full history, where today we have to essentially use camera technology, and that's not everywhere. I mean, it's just in parts of the state and so forth. So again, these are all good things to keep in mind, and we're staying open to possibilities of improving what we have today.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for John? Well, thank you for your time, John. It's a very interesting presentation.
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda, item number 6, fund transfer eligibility between PAG and the RTA. Jamie Brown.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity. So at the October 20th TPC meeting, a request was made for a report at the next TPC meeting related to any transfer of funds for past PAG programs into the RTA. So per the request, this is to, quote, understand what programs in the PAG have had their budgets reduced so that those dollars become freed up to move over to the RTA, end quote. So all PAG overall work programs, or OWPs, dating back to fiscal year 2013 through 14 were reviewed for this request. And please note that the RTA board direction from 2014 did not go into full effect until fiscal year 2019 through 2020. Through researching the budgets of these regional council approved OWPs, staff was unable to find a situation where programs funding was reduced so that those funds could be shifted to the RTA. As described in the memo in the TPC meeting packet for this item, there are some important points about the OWP to keep in mind. PAG's OWP is developed to address the roles and responsibilities that are required of PAG to meet specific federal and state mandates. These include requirements of PAG as the federally designated MPO and state requirements of the Regional Transportation Authority. As the governing board of the region's MPO, the Regional Council is the sole responsible body with authority over PAG's OWP and operational expenditures, which are also subject to compliance review and approval by ADOT, the Federal Highway Administration, and the Federal Transit Administration. As part of the PAG RTA policies, regional revenues directed to RTA projects have not impacted any PAG programs. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. That concludes my report on this item, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Jamie on this item? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Item number 7, Arizona State Performance Measures, Measure Projections. David Mitchell.
Hi, good morning, Vice Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for having me. I'm David Mitchell. I'm here today to present the FAST Act ADOT's safety performance projections for 2022. This is an action item. At the end, I will ask for recommendation for Regional Council's adoption of the projections. In my presentation, we'll go over some of the existing visions and goals that are in our planning and policy documents. We'll do a review of the long-range targets that we have adopted and established in our long-range transportation plan. And we will also take a look at the safety performance of those specific targets. How are we doing towards achieving those? These are the existing visions and goals that we have in our planning documents. We have a vision in our strategic transportation safety plan, working towards 0 deaths on our public roadways. In that same plan, we also have a goal to annually see a substantial reduction, upwards of 10% annually. And every time that we deliver a new tip, we should have this in mind and renew this principle. And then in our long-range plan, the RMAP, we have a Vision 0 mentality to significantly reduce the number of fatalities. And in fact, if our aspirational goal is to eliminate them entirely. These are the long-range targets that we have set for the region. These were adopted in the 2045 RMAP and then are projecting out to 2045. Based on baseline data of 2015, we want to see 25% reductions in total fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. We use VMT to calculate rates, and we also want to see a 45% reduction in fatality and serious injury rates based on the number of miles driven on our roadways. In terms of non-motorists, our bicycle and pedestrians, we want to see 33%, 70% in similar category performance measure categories. So you can see here our long-range goals is to really drive the numbers down from where we stood in 2015. What PAG does is we want to see how are we doing on we're tracking towards these targets. We look at it annually. We look at it when we deliver a new tip. We also look at it anytime we do an update to the RMAP. It's rather than just setting the targets and doing nothing, we think it's best planning practice to evaluate how we are currently performing. And I'll get back to that in a moment, but that'll allow me to introduce the action item, and that is the state safety projections for 2022. These were adopted last fall, and as the MPO, we have the responsibility to adopt or establish our own projections within a 180-day time frame. So the deadline would be February 27. But taking a look into the FAST Act Performance Measures Program, this is a federal requirement. It was initiated with MAP 21 and carried forward with the FAST Act program. Since 2018, this has been a state and MPO activity where reporting is done. It includes setting of annual safety projections, and for the PAG's part in it, we report and track for the PAG region to ADOT. The projections are statewide measures and are just their predictions on where ADOT thinks the state will fall based on existing data. It is anticipated performance for the short term. It varies. It's completely different than the RMAP performance measures program that we have, whereas we're tracking to long-range targets. And these are aspirational goals. We're not using existing data to set or establish performance. We have set desired performance and are tracking our achievement towards it. So that's the difference between the FAST Act performance measures program that we participate in and the RMAP program that we have designed for ourselves. So ADOT, again, they use the projections to track statewide conditions, and these are 5-year averages of performance. They're not just taking a look at 1 year, they're looking 5 years back, and they use these to establish projections for 5 different safety measures. We'll get into those in a moment. And one way that PAG has recognized a way to utilize these in our planning efforts, in addition to just supporting the program, we can actually use the statewide projections and apply them to PAG data to evaluate how are we tracking and trending to our desired performance. Because again, we don't use existing data, we can use projected data to do that. These are the statewide projections, and this will be the action item that I will be asking for this committee to recommend adoption of. There are 5 measures. 2 of them, the state projects 2% increases for the next 2 years. And the methodology for applying this projection is to apply it to existing year data, that would be 2020, to forecast and predict a 2021 value, and then compound that rate again, so another 2% to project it to for the 2022 value. And that's how we land for the first line item of number of fatalities. The state projected totals for 1,100 fatalities. Using that number, we're able to, they calculate a 5-year average. That would be the 5-year fatality figure. That would be the performance measures is over 1,000. So those are how, that's the methodology that ADOT uses, and they applied that for all five measures. So they use existing data to forecast out 2 years ahead, and then calculate any rates based on those forecasted combined with the real data. We can see decreases in 3 of the 5 categories. In the last few go-arounds, we've seen decreases in serious injuries and serious injury rates. Last year, we were at a no change in number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, but this time around, ADOT is projecting fortunately, they're projecting a decrease. You can see the color coding I have on there. The red represents a undesirable direction in the data, and the green represents a desirable direction in the data. This is a look at the PAG data for that first performance measure, total fatalities. The line in black represents the performance measure of 5-year average. You can see the 5 years of actual data in solid, and then the 2 projected values in the dashed. The red values are the actual year annual values. Those are whole numbers. The other values of the 5-year average are decimal values because of the averaging. So that explains why we would have a 0.6 of number of fatalities, if you're wondering. There's a purple triangle that's out here in 2022. So if we were to line up, we've got 3 values. We've got ADOT projection. We're applying the ADOT projection to the PAG data to forecast these data points. And then we have a value for an RMAC benchmark. So this is where we would need to be as a region in order to be on pace for a 2045 target. So if we were to be able to have a chance at reaching it, given our current pace, we would need to be at 125.9 fatalities as a 5-year average. You can see last year we're performing worse than that, and we're continuing to move in the opposite direction. So we're able to assign a value for the region that we are behind pace. So applying that 2% increase of the ADOT projection, we're able to evaluate our performance. We can see in our data, but here we can visually see that we are significantly behind pace. For the action item, we're not coming to you for anything related to the RMAP value or the progress towards it. Those are just informational items. The item that will be up for an action is the ADOT projection only, the 2% increase. For the second measure, fatality rate, again, this is calculated using total VMT for the region. It's per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. This is very similar to the last graph we saw. We would expect it to be in line with it, and we are trending in the opposite direction of our desired RMAP target. We are behind pace. We can see a huge spike right here at 2020. So there has been, the way that this graph, we can read this, is the current values of the current conditions of our road network are really driving this 5-year average up. We had been performing relatively well in 2016 and 2017, and then we started seeing this spike. So it's recent behaviors and recent conditions that are causing this performance on a roadway. And it's not just ours, it's statewide, it's nationwide. And with the 2% increase that is predicted because of those behaviors, we're landing at an extremely and unfortunately high rate for the next 2 years. We were to look at total serious injuries. This is one that the region has continuously seen a decrease, a fortunate decrease in this. In fact, we're performing better than where we would need to be on pace. So if we continue to drive it down, we will have no problem meeting our 2045 target. And here ADOT sees a projection statewide to see a 7% decrease in the same value performance values. For the serious injury rate, again, this is based on the 100 million VMT. The values follow in suit with the total numbers, and we are performing well and on pace to meet our 2045 targets. But again, we are looking to an action item will be just on the ADOT projection. The final performance measure is the non-motorized users. These are our vulnerable pedestrian and bicyclists that are on the public road network. This is a, you can see the data is kind of all over the place, but we are seeing a projected value for it to be decreasing in the horizon. 1% statewide decrease applied to the PAG data puts us pretty much right on top of where we would want to be on pace. So we're barely on pace. So this is a win if you want to just look at data points, but we would really want to be much lower, like we were in the previous slide, where there was significant difference between where we are and where we would need to be. So we are still. This still tells us that we still have a relatively dangerous network for our non-motorized users. However, we are just looking at the ADOT projection for the 1% decrease for 2022. And that includes the information that I have on slides, but I will open it back up to you, Vice Chair, and members of the committee for any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions for David on this item?
This is Robin. Excuse me.
Go ahead, Robin.
Just one question, really. It's good that we're doing well in 3 categories. I'm wondering if we've done any sort of a look into cause and effect for the fatality items, and if there's anything regionally that we can do to start to bring those into a direction that we want. In other words, lowering it. I guess I'm looking for some practical suggestions and looking to PAG staff for any practical suggestions you may have.
Sure, and very similar came up in the Transportation and Safety Subcommittee. So thank you, Robin, for also bringing it up here, because that is an important question. So ADOT also chimed in on, and they're seeing similar trends what we're seeing here in the region, and there's a lot of behavioral causes to the number of crashes that we're seeing. The data that we look at is acquired from the state and includes characteristics for the crash causes such as lighting conditions, speed, substance abuse, things of that nature are all documented within the crash data. What they're seeing statewide is a lot of things related to speed, behavioral issues, lack of enforcement. Locally, there are some directives that our police force aren't pulling over for speeding and minor traffic violations. So there could be many factors that are not engineered or design related to our roadways. To answer your question, it's not quite sure what we can do as a region other than to take the first step and become more aware of what's happening. From a PAG approach, we can use the data to help tell the story of what the end results are. We have some technologies, some tool sets that can look at the data further. We have our Safety Data Explorer that is at your disposal to be able to look at not only project level, but regional level of what's causing crashes for that road segment, for the corridor, for a section of town or the entire region. We can look at, are we seeing a lot of speed related crashes? Are we seeing alcohol related crashes? Is it nighttime? Is it, we've had a lot of rain this summer. Are there anything related to roadway conditions when it's wet? So that's all kind of stuff that's documented in the crash data. There are also some limitations to the data. For example, our region we don't report out on crashes involving only property damage. So that some of the data that we have as a region may not be complete in that regard. So it's an uphill battle in every angle, Robin, to really break down what's causing our crashes, but even more importantly, how can we correct it?
Is your hand still up, Robin?
I wanted to just add one more comment, because that description sounds to me like we need to pursue more education programs in the PAG region to help people understand a little bit about how behavior is also affecting our fatality rate. And I think that we let go of some of our programs, but I'm wondering if we can create some traffic safety programs. I know the city of Tucson has done some PSAs. I don't know how much those help, but I would just like to encourage us as a group to really think through what we can do that's maybe not just physical fixes, because it's always hard to find enough funding to do physical fixes. And maybe some of this, hearing about the speeding and the behavior and the drug use, maybe that is something we can help with training and partner with our police forces to train the public better. I don't know, it's just a suggestion. Thanks.
Yeah, Ursula, keep your hand up.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. I appreciate that. It was interesting and I'll say depressing to hear that some of those, even though 3 trends are going up, the fact that 2 are going down is not good. And I just wanted to echo what Robin was saying, which is, as I was listening to you, I was sort of thinking, well, if we're doing what we're doing and we continue to do what we do, then it seems like we shouldn't expect a different outcome unless we do something different, right? And knowing that everybody's trying really hard to fix the infrastructure issues, but I was also curious about, what the other components might be that we could implement. And I think the education piece that Robin mentioned is something that we really ought to look at more.
Yes.
And just letting people know. And I don't know what else might be out there, but I think that you pointed out some of the data that you can look at. So analyze kind of what some of the impacts or the conditions were around these accidents, and then focusing some educational material or whatever else might come out of that once we understand the causes a little better. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, Mr. Ursula, and Mr. Vice Chair, if I may. It's important to recognize that we are here to, as the action item for the state projections, but the purpose of us bringing forward the RMAP benchmarks and how we're trending, as Robin and you, Ursula, both pointed out, is it's doing nothing with the data gets us nowhere. We're going to have the status quo. And that is why, for the first time, PAG is thought to be good planning practice to show you how we are performing towards those projections, because if you don't know that information, there's no action to be taken to change course. And so that is brought to you as an informational item, so we can have that discussion in some format, maybe not today, but down the road. And with the other committees and segments, public safety is also looking at roadway fatalities, because it's the leading cause of, or one of the leading causes of deaths and serious injury, which is a health concern. So it's much like PAG is an interdisciplinary agency. This is a interdepartment, or it touches all agencies of our member jurisdictions too. So it's not just a transportation related issues, but this is a starting point. We think it's important for us to get the data out there. In years past, we would get too hung up on how we would use the data for setting or adopting ADOT's projections, when we think there could be value in using those to communicate to our leadership, our public, and those that are on the ground and doing action to actually make a difference in the desirable direction, to have the right information at hand. And so thank you for recognizing that that's how we can put this information to use.
Thanks. I wonder if it would be worth making this almost, and I defer to the rest of the group on this, but I wonder about making this the standing item and having on the agenda something about, like a safety action items or something, so that we keep this really at the forefront. So that's a suggestion, and I will. I see other raised hands.
I just say, Ursula, I would definitely support that notion.
Anna?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So we're gonna make a recommendation to accept the ADOT safety projections. So my question was really, if PAG was to do our own projections, would we follow the same format that ADOT, do you think, that ADOT did by going with the past 5 years and averaging out? Do you think we would use the same format, or would you recommend the same format that ADOT has used to make projections?
Yes, I anticipate. So in fact, we've reached out to ADOT and Federal Highways on their advice on such. And we received strong recommendation to adopt and use the same methodology as ADOT. Even if we were to set our own, we would still choose a similar. An obstacle that we have though is VMT. The data that we rely on, it all comes from the state. The crash data, the VMT data, that is all state data anyhow. So there would be a lot of biased difference. There wouldn't be much difference in our methodology based on such. So there also would not be a change in how PAG affects ADOT's participation in the FAST Act program. The Federal Highways just looks at how the state is performing and does not look at or assess or do any type of evaluation at an MPO or a regional level. Does that answer your question or address any concerns you might have on it?
No, that did. Thank you, Dave.
And Paul, did you have something? Did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think what Dave demonstrated does show what the ADOT methodologies would look like for the PAG region. And that's really important perspective to know. But what we're also trying to provide is in comparison to that anticipated performance level for the coming calendar year, what are our aspirational targets? Where do we want to be driving safety numbers? And so that's the work that we've done in connection with RMAP safety targets and the Regional Safety Plan of 2016. We want to continue to analyze and track to target. And I think you all have brought up a really important point, which is to continue to look for opportunities to keep safety at the forefront of the discussions. Otherwise, it's going to become less of a priority. So if it is a priority of yours, then we need to help you figure out ways to really create a stronger safety culture in the region so that we don't just exclusively look at infrastructure fixes or other pieces. There is no magic bullet that's going to improve safety. We need to look at a multifaceted approach: education, enforcement, emergency service response, and engineering, of course. So we have built a fairly robust system to help look at the data to get a clearer understanding of what's going on with safety. And we've tried to serve that up for the practitioners so they can understand the details of what the safety profiles throughout the network might look like. So we stand ready to help support those activities and support TPC and other groups in this kind of pursuit. I will remind you that today we are here to look at the federal requirement that ADOT has, which is to project where they expect safety for these projections to be in the coming calendar year. So we think it's a solid methodology. There are some unfortunate directions for a couple of the measures, but this is really important for us to know, for the region to know, for all of you to be conscious of as we start to think more about how we can send safety numbers in the right direction.
Yes, Jose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How does ADOT's projections, and especially on the fatality category, compare to the national goals? Is there a national goal set up by, I think it was MAP 21?
Yeah, I don't believe nationwide they set a specific number. What they have done was to see a significant reduction and are evaluating such through the assessments that the states go through. If a state has difficulty or doesn't continuously meet their projections, in other words, they're performing worse than they're projected, it may cause some effect in how funding is directed in terms of safety, highway safety funds.
So there's no national goals to compare to?
Not in terms of targets, measures, numerical measures, but the goals are to see reductions in fatalities.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's no further discussion. This is an action item. Are we being asked to make the formal recommendation for adoption by ADOT, or are we making a recommendation to regional council?
It'd be making a recommendation for regional council to adopt the projections.
Okay. So the ask is for a motion to recommend that the regional council approve or signify to ADOT support of their safety measures. Can I get a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second? Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Item number 8 is the draft Public Transit Human Health Services Coordinated Transportation Plan. Janine Sullivan.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So today we're going to be talking about the draft version of the Public Transit Human Services Coordinated Transportation Plan. And just for some context, the PAG Public Transit Human Services Coordinated Transportation Plan is a federally required plan for the PAG region. It identifies the transportation needs of individuals with disabilities, seniors, and people with low incomes. Some of the other elements are that it includes or provides rather strategies for meeting those local needs and prioritizes the transportation services. But the primary purpose of the Coordination Transportation Plan is really to provide guidance on the use of the federal Section 5310 grants within the region. So for some additional context, Section 5310 program provides capital grants and operating assistance to nonprofits and public agencies in acquiring and operating vehicles to transport older adults and persons with disabilities. So for this particular update, it's going to include a variety of elements, some of which are identifying transportation resources and evaluating different needs and assessments. It proposes some strategies to bridge those regional gaps. It prioritizes rather collaboration to solve regional challenges. And like I stated before, the primary purpose is to provide guidance on the use of federal Section 5310 grants. So it's going to identify the priorities for implementation of FTA Section 5310 funded projects. So that's kind of a brief overview of some context or some foundational elements with regard to what the plan is and what you will see in the plan or the draft plan that is actually up right now for public comment. So the next slide we're going to talk about is plan development. And so for plan development, there's a variety of stages that we went through in developing the plan. And the first starting point was really the foundational elements of discussions that were rooted in our mobility coordination working group meetings that took place both in 2020 and 2021. So if we were to kind of look back at those meetings, a lot of the topics you will see kind of cascade into the workings of this plan. So when we had a variety of discussions in our working group meetings, some of the topics were rooted in fleet forecasting and vehicle utilization so that we can make better decisions or understand and plan well for fleet life cycles, evaluate vehicle utilization, so we're being good financial stewards with resources, and of course, assessing internal useful benchmarks. So those are some of the things that we discussed to include in the line of financial stewardship, preventative maintenance and cost tracking. So we talked through some preventive maintenance plans and strategies for that, and to include lift maintenance, service area boundary maps, a survey that we did, in which we're going to talk further about in the next few slides, some agency profile data, vehicle inventory, past training needs throughout our region, and then of course, what are the emerging needs and gaps within our region? And some of those pieces can be tied to like access to healthcare, employment, training, availability of service, eligibility requirements, even cascading into technology and information and safety, or even availability of resources. So one of the other topics that we also talked about within our group meetings were it just really evaluating transportation elements for elderly and disabled populations. And some of those topics included accessibility, destinations and trip schedules, mobility considerations, functional considerations, sensory considerations, and intellectual and cognitive considerations. So those are all in the fabric of those discussions so that we can better serve those populations. And then of course we had some regional priorities discussions, and that translated into like night and weekend service, information, how do we communicate the availability of services to those that need it most, to include transit options and travel training, special needs transportation, and then what are the opportunities to coordinate throughout the region, both in rural and urbanized areas, which lend itself to determining kind of what are our short and long-term goals. And then of course, 5310 funding priorities. So those are all the discussions that led us into the development of the plan. And so one of the other pieces that we decided to do was to do a 5310 human services and related provider survey. And so we basically asked 13 different participating agencies within the 5310 program, as well as volunteer-based driver programs through Pima Council on Aging, to answer a survey. And so between the service area boundary maps and this particular survey, we were really trying to solve for better understanding a variety of things. And some of those things are, what are the percentages of programs that have a primary focus on a specific population, the number of agencies that serve within a very specific geographic footprint, whether it be urban or rural, according to a program type, versus just the organization as a whole. So we were really kind of narrowing down by program type, which was something that we hadn't looked at in this way before. The percent of programs that were offering client-based transportation services to specific populations versus programs that are open to the general public. And then opportunities for coordination among 5310 agencies or public transit providers. And then within that framework, we were also looking at what are the opportunities to coordinate both client-based transportation and non-client riders. And so as we looked at non-client riders, that was both open to the public opportunities, but also one agency who has a client-based transportation partnering with another 5310 agency that's also client-based, so that they could be more efficient with their trips and serve more people in our region. And of course, better understanding what are the primary trip purposes for each of the agencies that serve within our region. So the next part that we looked at was the service area boundary maps. And so we actually worked with our ArcGIS team here, and we put together service area boundary maps for roughly 49 or 50 agencies or programs within the PAG region. And so kind of a high level view of what that represents is about 13 human service transportation providers who are active in the 5310 program, 2 public transit providers that are also active in the 5310 program. We reached out to 8 non-emergency medical transportation providers to map their service area boundary. We worked with Pima Council on Aging, and we mapped 15 of their transportation programs that are volunteer-based or volunteer driver programs, 3 different food banks, to better understand the service area boundary maps for food delivery programs to eligible individuals, and then 6 private transportation providers, and those can include taxis, shuttles, etc. And then we even reached out to the Veterans Administration Transportation Program and the DAV to map their service area boundaries as well. So if we were to kind of take a look at that, it represented reaching out to over 50 organizations, which included like 5310 providers, the volunteer drivers, et cetera. And we mapped those. And so in mapping them and the survey information, we're able to kind of grasp a lot of key information in the development of this plan. And so we are able to better understand population served relative to agency programs. We got a better understanding of the footprint of transportation services that are provided relative to urban and rural areas. And we were able to identify opportunities for coordination to include public paratransit. We also were able to get a better assessment of what are the driver training needs and associated resources to better support these agencies in our region. And then with that, what are some other support tools or elements that need to be more closely examined? And those can be in the categories of whether it be performance monitoring, preventive maintenance, anything that helps with the stabilization of fleets, and then most importantly, what are the emerging needs of specific special needs populations in our region? So in developing the plan, we also took a look at what other resources or information is available to us to make sure that as we develop this plan, we have not left any rock unturned. So we looked at some previous surveys and actually implemented or utilized some pieces of those plans in this particular plan. And so some of those plans and surveys that we used included the City of Tucson's 5-year strategic plan. We used a regional transit marketing plan from the city as well. We used our own short-range transit program implementation plan, our 2045 regional mobility and accessibility plan, and then some previous surveys that were done by PAG, one of which was a rider survey and one of which was a community needs assessment survey. So that's kind of a high level view of some of the other surveys or reports that were used in the development of this plan. Next part is of the plan in terms of its development. It was really about assessments. And so we wanted to kind of assess what the needs are and what are the goals as we work to develop this plan. And so from a high level view, we looked at needs, gaps, and opportunities for coordination. And basically the assessments were broken down into a variety of categories. Those categories are transit needs, special needs transportation, client-based transportation, volunteer-based transportation, and then veteran transportation support. Some of the other elements that we looked at are about priorities of strategies to advance regional coordination, which is going to show up on our next slide, as well as determination of regional goals and strategies. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the prioritization of regional goals and strategies, which I believe is on our next slide. And one of the main priorities for this was to basically better understand where our critical opportunities for coordination of transportation services exists within our region. And so to achieve this goal, different efforts were made to examine rural and urbanized area FTA Section 5310 funded programs. And we compared those and see how closely those programs aligned also with programs that are volunteer driver-based, such as through Neighbors Care Alliance programs, which are administered through the Tisma Council on Aging. And then we also took a look at transportation needs relative to medical appointments, counseling and case management, and of course, special needs populations. And so in going through that process, we were able to identify different opportunities for coordination. And those were evaluated within very specific frameworks. And those frameworks were volunteer-based transportation, how to expand rural transportation and connections to transit to include paratransit, client-based transportation services, and then addressing funding constraints, because if we don't address those, a lot of the other pieces are a little bit more challenging to come to fruition. So the other part that we looked at was how to determine the regional goals and the priorities. And I think that is on our next slide, if I'm not mistaken. And so when we were looking at regional goals and priorities, there was a foundational framework put in place. And so our next step was basically to say to ourselves, what are the regional goals and priorities? And so in looking at the needs assessments that were done and that have been referenced in this plan, we asked members of the Mobility Coordination Working Group and the Transit Working Group to essentially rank the priority of each of the strategies and associated coordination efforts that align with those specific regional goals. And so the regional goals were essentially categorized into a variety of categories, and those fall into these buckets, if you will. So it's new or expanded services to meet identified gaps in the rural areas, new or expanded services to meet identified gaps in urbanized areas, and then of course support for transportation services, cost containment practices, elements to better serve the needs of the general public, and that conclude non-client riders, such as seniors, disabled populations, and low-income individuals, how to maintain assets in a state of good repair, coordination of non-client rider groups, and then of course information resources. And that can include travel training or any other types of information resources to help people make the most of our transportation services in our region. So after the working groups established the priorities for those particular strategies and coordination efforts, we had to start looking at what are the funding priorities for FTA Section 5310 projects. And so the framework for those particular priorities included I believe it's 5 things, and it's support of mobility management and accessibility initiatives, maintaining existing fleets in a state of good repair, addressing a regional need or gap, recruitment, training, and retention of drivers, and then transportation services coordination. And that could be public transit, nonprofit, private, and volunteer-based. And so the 2 working groups actually determine the priorities for all of the goals and strategies that are within those categories that I just kind of talked through. And then I believe in our next slide, it kind of captures those funding priorities that I just mentioned. But then as we lean into taking this draft plan to regional council in January, like I shared at the start, we are in a 30-day public comment period. It started on December 13th and it goes through January 11th. And it will go to management committee on January 12th. And then I believe that is the tentative date anyway. And then January 27th for regional council. For some context on the public comment period, it went out to PAG stakeholders and regional stakeholders, and some of the stakeholders included over 85 individual organizations that are closely tied to programs that serve seniors, low-income individuals, and those with a disability. And that's not an all-inclusive list when I gave that number. That's just kind of a starting point, and then those lists were added to the broader list that we use when we send it out for public comment. And so at this point, I'll just leave it up to any questions that people might have at this time.
Okay, I see we have one hand up. Steve?
Yeah, hey, thank you. Janine, great presentation. I have a question for you. One of the things you do in the development of the plan is you identify potential areas for coordination. And I think that's a real key in terms of not only operating efficiently, but providing better service. But here's my question. What can PAG do to encourage and foster that coordination among agencies and providers? Is there anything in the plan that addresses that?
Make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. So the question I believe that you're asking is, what can PAG do to kind of nurture or further encourage the coordination of efforts between the agencies? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So the Mobility Coordination Working Group that's established here at PAG holds meetings quarterly, number one. Actually, this year, I believe we held meetings 5 times throughout the year, but those meetings are open to the public, number one. But everything that we discuss in those meetings is to actually do a lot of what you're just saying. It is to advance and nurture coordination within the region. It also helps to shed light on what are the things that we need to be looking at to update our plan from year to year as needs present themselves. And then of course, as we do larger updates every 4 years. But I think, within that framework of working with the mobility working group and having it being open to the public and growing that particular program, if you will, I think it allows for them to be an open dialogue about how do we come together to advance coordination in our region. So I think it's just more about, being consistent in our approach and furthering that dialogue and inviting more people to the table as appropriate for 5310 specifically, because that is the focus of that program is for, coordinating transportation for elderly, disabled, and low-income populations. So I don't know if that helps answer your question. I think that's a big part of it.
Did. Thank you, Janine.
Are there any further questions for Janine? Okay, well, thank you very much, Janine, for your time. And thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee.
Okay. Next item is item number 9, Highway User Revenue Fund Revenue Report. David Zinda.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'll actually be covering this item for Nathan Barrett today, who had to duck out a little bit early. The latest HERF revenues report is in the meeting materials packet, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David, I have a couple questions. I know ADOT in September of this year updated their statewide HERF projections. So I'm wondering how we're taking that into account, because they're significantly higher than what we had adopted when we did the TIP. And then further, I noticed that the 2.6 projections have already exceeded what we programmed in the TIP for this fiscal year. And the 12.6 is on track to probably be about 6.5 million more in collections. So what's the plan with those things?
Right, thank you for your question, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and Ms. Skinner. So when it comes to some of these excess funds, we're still, we're keeping track of them and want to keep you updated. As for getting those programmed, which I think might be a part of this question, we're still analyzing the funding needs and will continue accordingly to program these supplemental funds as they arise. As we have more information, including the anticipating time frame for doing so, we'll keep you updated. But as of now, we're just kind of keeping track. And when we have more readiness to take action, we'll be sure to let you know.
So follow up, when you say you're keeping track, what does that look like? Because it's not really shown on the report that we're sent. So when you're saying keeping track, what does that look like for you all?
Right now, we continue to receive the reports directly from ADOT, and we kind of compile them into these reports that we provide to you. I would also invite Jamie, who supervises me, if he has any other comments. I am a little bit new, and once again, I'm filling in. So if there's anything else that should be added, I would open it up.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you, Ms. Skinner, members of the committee, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think you answered it correctly, David, that we continue to provide this information based on the latest ADOT reports. We're going to continue to monitor the situation. And as we have more information, we will determine how best to bring that back to the committees for programming. So,
Thank you.
Robin?
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, I would also like to see a projection based upon these new numbers of where we think we might end up at the end of this fiscal year. I know we've seen those before. Is that possible?
David, did you want to try to answer that question?
Jamie or David?
Sure. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thanks for your question. I don't know that I think we can continue to try to do that, but Jamie, could you go ahead and take this?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ms. Rain, your question was about developing revenue projections. Is that correct?
I think it was adjusting the projections for this current fiscal year we're in.
Yes, thank you, Keith.
Okay, so we don't typically do a mid-cycle correction to our revenue projections. We update our projections as we prepare for the next TIP development cycle. So we anticipate developing new revenue projections and work with our TIP subcommittee in the summer of 2022.
So we wouldn't see these funds until 2023?
Well, I don't know that we've made that determination. It's possible we could prepare for a supplemental NOFA prior to then. But as David was saying, we're at this point still monitoring the situation with the funding levels, and we will make a determination internally as to whether or not we're available to program those anytime before the next TIP development cycle.
Is any additional funds that come to light still going to be part of the supplantation, pretty much?
I believe until
fiscal year.
Another direction is given by regional council or the RTA board in terms of that policy, that policy will still hold.
Okay.
To direct all regional funds to RTA projects.
As part of supplantation?
Yes.
Not in terms of like a NOFA or something? Okay.
Yeah, it would be, well, if I may, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my understanding is the NOFA would be similar to NOVAs we've issued recently, where they would be
which projects are related to
RTA projects
at this time, which RTA projects can absorb them at this time.
Correct.
Robin, did you have another question?
I just wanted, Mr. Vice Chair, thank you, wanted to say that I would really like to have a projection prior to next summer, just to sort of gauge what direction we think we're going.
Okay. And thank you, Ms. Rain. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we can also see if ADOT has developed an official projection. And if we have that available, we can share that out with to the committee. Would that be helpful?
Mr. Vice Chair, Jamie, yes, thank you. That would be helpful.
Okay, we'll look into that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this item? Anna?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And Jamie, so you said you're thinking about maybe doing a NOFA with the additional funding. When do you think you might know, or can we make a request that a NOFA be put out? We can see there's additional funding available, maybe from last year and even this year. And we all know there's several projects in need of additional funding. So I know you're thinking about it, but can this committee make a request that won't be done?
I believe I'm the one that brought up NOFA.
If the question is directed towards me, Ms. Olivares, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I would say we still don't have a time frame yet, but this conversation is helpful for us to know that there's definitely interest in that. And so we'll bring that back to our leadership and have a conversation. And hopefully at a future meeting, we'll have a better sense of the timing of when we're able to consider a supplemental NOFA for programming, or if it will just be best to program that as part of the next TIP development cycle and incorporate that the excess funding into the revenue projections in the summer of 2022.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If there's no further questions on this item, okay. Thank you, David. Jamie.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Next item, item number 10, future agenda items. Is there any suggestions for future agenda items? Oh, we have two. We have Catherine and Robin. We'll go with Catherine first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So kind of continuation of that last one, I think there's two items that would be helpful. One is, of course, the infrastructure bill. I think the last time we had a report on that, that was before it had been approved. So a better idea of what that means for the increase in federal funds to the region. And then the second item I think would be helpful would be back in 2014 when the action was taken, the 2014 policy that we're working with RTA. One of the motions was that tip revenues should be reviewed if there's a significant change. So it looks like, you know, 12.6 is maybe 30% over what we had put in the tip. This year, 2.6 is going to be maybe 5 times what we programmed. And then with this federal money, I think that constitutes a significant change. So being that the finance subcommittee and the tip subcommittee don't meet regularly, I think TPC might be an appropriate meeting to begin that tip revenue discussion.
Is there a comment on that, Dave Adler or Jamie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I think Dave Adler's mic isn't working properly, but yeah, happy to consider these future agenda items. I do believe that at the next TPC meeting, we are planning to have a legislative update that will include federal and state activities. So we're happy to provide an update on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And then with regard to the question about additional HERF funds, that's something we can also bring back, I believe. But Paul or Dave, if your mic is working, any additional comments about what we can bring back?
I'm sorry, I should have mentioned Paul then earlier as well.
Yeah, no, this is more Dave's territory. So I think Jamie's answer is as accurate as we have at this point. We'll certainly discuss that with leadership and see what opportunities there are to bring those information items and that discussion forward.
Thank you. Robin?
I would just, Mr. Vice Chair, like to add one more future agenda item, and that is the item, a standing item that Ursula Nelson suggested earlier, to have a discussion at every meeting for the foreseeable future about what steps we're taking to decrease our fatalities on the roadways in the PAG region.
Paul, do you have a comment on that?
Without getting too deep into discussion of what the item should be, we'll look for opportunities to bring that discussion forward for sure.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair, I just did want to mention any and all future agenda items will not include a couple of folks who are here with us today that I'd like to take an opportunity to acknowledge. Diana Alarcon, who unfortunately was not able to make the meeting. This is her last TPC meeting, is my understanding. So farewell to her, and hopefully we'll stay in touch with her as she does great things elsewhere. And I'd also like to thank Ursula Nelson for her years of service on TPC and bringing some wonderful perspective and great questions and issues to the discussion. I believe Ursula will be stepping away from Pima County DEQ soon after the turn of the year, and we'll certainly miss her.
I was not aware of Ursula. Congratulations, Ursula.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm retiring on January the 4th, so just a few weeks out.
Okay.
Barbara Escobar is going to be the interim director for PDEQ, and I know she's on the call today as well, so she'll continue to participate for us.
Congratulations, Ursula. Well earned.
Thank you so much.
You've done
appreciate
a
it.
lot for this region over the years,
Oh.
that's for sure.
It's been fun, and I've enjoyed working with all of you, certainly, and we'll miss all of my contacts at work, but time for retirement indeed.
Good.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, with that, can we get a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
And
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.